The iron key turned in the lock at exactly 11:30. Lyra's callous fingers worked quickly, unhooking the heavy ring from the sleeping steward's belt before replacing it with the duplicate she'd commissioned from the blacksmith 3 months prior. She moved through the darkened corridor like smoke, her bare feet silent against the cold stone. The palace slept, but she never did. Not on nights when the moon hung full and silver in the sky. She slipped past the guardhouse where 2 soldiers dozed at their post, their dice game abandoned beside half-empty cups of wine. The kitchen door gave its familiar groan as she eased it open, and she froze, counting her heartbeats. 1, 2, 3. No footsteps. No shouts. She exhaled and stepped into the night. The autumn air bit at her skin through the thin servant's dress, but Lyra welcomed the cold. It kept her sharp. She crossed the moonlit courtyard, keeping to the shadows of the garden wall, and ducked beneath the rose arbor that concealed the gap in the stones. Beyond the palace grounds, the greywood waited, its ancient trees standing like sentinels against the star-scattered sky. If you're already hooked by Lyra's midnight escape, don't forget to hit that subscribe button. This story gets darker and more intense from here, and you won't want to miss what happens next. Now, let's dive deeper. She ran. The forest floor was soft with moss and fallen leaves, and she knew every root, every stone, every twist of the path by heart. Her woven basket bumped against her hip, already half filled with silver root she'd gathered from the eastern grove. The moonthread plants grew only in one place, deeper in the woods where even hunters refused to venture, where the old magic still breathed. 20 minutes of hard running brought her to the clearing. Moonrest Hollow. The ruined shrine stood at its center, its marble pillars cracked and overgrown with ivy. 6 massive iron chains were bolted to the stone foundation, and at the end of each chain, yellow eyes gleamed in the darkness. The largest wolf stood as she approached. Its fur was black as midnight, and old scars crisscrossed its muzzle. It watched her with an intelligence that made her chest ache. She reached out, and the beast lowered its head, allowing her fingers to sink into its thick coat. "I know, Darian," she whispered, her voice barely audible. Speaking hurt. Each word cost her. The blood vow she'd taken 3 years ago had bound her tongue with invisible chains more terrible than the ones that held her brothers. Every syllable she spoke tightened the curse around her family's necks. 3 sentences, the witch had said. 3 sentences before the spell kills them all. So Lyra had learned silence. The palace servants thought her simple, mute, damaged. They spoke around her as though she were furniture, and she let them. Better to be invisible than to accidentally doom everyone she loved. She moved to the second wolf, smaller, rust-colored, with her youngest brother's gentle eyes. 2 more shrouds, Kieran. Just 2 more. She stroked his head, then turned to the others. Matthias, Rowan, Felix, and Gareth. 6 brothers. 6 wolves. 6 moon shrouds she had to weave before the blood moon rose in 4 weeks' time. The moonthread plants grew near the shrine's northern edge, their silver leaves catching the light like captured starfire. Lyra worked quickly, harvesting only what she needed, whispering apologies to each plant as her knife separated stem from root. The forest provided, but it demanded respect. A branch cracked behind her. Lyra spun, her heart hammering. A figure stood at the clearing's edge, tall and broad-shouldered, dressed in dark hunting leathers. The moonlight caught the silver wolf emblem on his chest. Her blood turned to ice. King Kalen Duskbane stepped into the clearing. "Well," he said, his voice low and dangerous. "What do we have here?" Lyra's mind raced. She couldn't run. He'd catch her. She couldn't speak. She wouldn't. Her hands clutched the basket of moonthread, her knuckles white. The king's gaze swept the clearing, taking in the ruined shrine, the chains, the 6 enormous wolves that watched him with unnatural stillness. His hand rested on the pommel of his sword, but he didn't draw it. Instead, he looked at her. Really looked at her. "I know you," he said slowly. "You work in the scullery." The mute girl. She dropped her eyes to the ground, making herself small, harmless. It was a practiced motion. "Look at me." The command in his voice made her obey before she could think. His eyes were gray as storm clouds, sharp and assessing. He studied her face as though reading a map, and something in his expression shifted. "You're not afraid of me," he observed. "Everyone else in my kingdom either fears me or wants something from me. But you." He took a step closer. "You're afraid of something else entirely." Darian growled, low and threatening. The king's hand tightened on his sword. "No," Lyra mouthed, shaking her head frantically at her brother. She stepped between them, holding up her hands. Kaelin's eyebrows rose. "The wolves know you." It wasn't a question. "They're protecting you." She nodded once. "And you're protecting them." He tilted his head, studying the scene with a strategist's eye. "Interesting. Very interesting." He fell silent for a long moment, and Lyra's pulse thundered in her ears. One word from him, and the guards would come. They'd kill her brothers. Destroy everything. "I could have you arrested," he said finally. "Sneaking out of the palace. Consorting with wild beasts in a forbidden forest. The nobles would call it witchcraft." She stood perfectly still, barely breathing. "But I won't." He stepped back, his hand leaving his sword. "Because I want to understand what I'm seeing here. And I suspect forcing answers from you would be." He paused, something almost like amusement flickering across his hard features. "Counterproductive." He turned to leave, then stopped. "Tomorrow, you'll be reassigned. No more scullery work. You'll serve me directly as my personal handmaiden." Lyra's eyes widened in horror. "Consider it insurance," Kaelin said. "You keep your secrets. I keep you where I can watch you." He glanced back at the wolves. "And perhaps we both stay alive a little longer." He walked to the clearing's edge, then paused. "Oh, and girl? Whatever you're doing out here every night, you have until the blood moon to finish it. After that, I'll require answers." He disappeared into the trees, leaving Lyra standing frozen in the moonlight, her carefully constructed world crumbling around her. The next morning arrived too soon. Chapter 2. Lyra stood in the king's private chambers, her hands clasped in front of her, trying not to shake. The room was austere despite its size, dominated by a massive desk covered in maps and military reports. Weapons lined the walls, each one well-used, well-maintained. This was not the room of a ceremonial ruler. This was the workspace of a warrior king. Kaelin sat behind his desk, reviewing a document. He'd been ignoring her for 10 minutes, and the silence stretched like a bowstring. Finally, he looked up. "Can you read?" She nodded. "Right?" Another nod. He pushed a piece of parchment and a quill across the desk toward her. "Then write your name." Lyra hesitated, then stepped forward. Her hand trembled as she dipped the quill in ink and wrote in careful letters, "Lyra Vale." "Lyra," he said, testing the name. "It means of the lyre, doesn't it? A musical instrument. Ironic for someone who doesn't speak." He leaned back in his chair, studying her. "How long?" She held up 3 fingers. 3 years of silence. His eyes narrowed. Choice or curse? The question was too perceptive. Lyra's breath caught. She picked up the quill again and wrote carefully. "Does it matter?" "Yes," he said simply. "Everything matters when it concerns my kingdom and the people in it. Even silent scullery maids who befriend wolves in forbidden forests." A knock at the door interrupted them. "Your Majesty," called the steward. "Lord Marson requests an audience." "Tell him I'm occupied," Kaelin replied, not taking his eyes off Lyra. "He says it's urgent, sire. Concerning the Valeri's delegation." Something dangerous flickered across the king's face. "Fine. Send him in." He gestured to Lyra. "Stand by the window. Say nothing. Do nothing. Simply observe." She obeyed, positioning herself in the corner where the morning light fell across the floor. Lord Marson entered, a thin man with calculating eyes, and barely glanced at her before launching into his report. "Your Majesty, Lady Sarastra of Valeri's has arrived a week early. She's demanding an immediate audience and has brought twice the agreed-upon retinue. Her father, Duke Hadrian, sent a strongly worded letter suggesting that the, and I quote, marriage alliance cannot wait." Kaelin's expression remained neutral, but Lyra saw his fingers tighten on the armrest of his chair. "I've made no promises regarding marriage. The Duke believes the trade agreements constitute a verbal contract. and with tensions rising along the border. The border tensions are manufactured, Kaelin interrupted. Hadrian wants his daughter wearing a crown, and he'll create whatever crisis necessary to achieve that goal. Perhaps, but the council advises that refusing the match could lead to war. The council advises I marry to avoid war. The council also advised I execute the Greywood rebels last year, which would have sparked a civil war. Forgive me if I don't immediately accept their wisdom. Lord Marsin's joy tightened. With respect, Your Majesty, you cannot rule alone forever. The kingdom needs an heir. It needs stability. Lady Sarastra is beautiful, educated, magically gifted. Dangerous, Kaelin finished. Don't forget dangerous. I've read the reports from Valeries. 3 nobles who opposed her family died in mysterious circumstances. Their estates were absorbed by the Duke within a month. Rumors, sire. Intelligence, Kaelin corrected. There's a difference. He stood, pacing to the window where Lyra stood. Tell Lady Sarastra I'll receive her tomorrow at the formal dinner. And Marsin? Increase the guard around the treasury and the armory. I don't trust her retinue. As you command. Marsin bowed and left, but not before casting a curious glance at Lyra. When they were alone again, Kaelin turned to her. You heard all that? She nodded. And you understand why I'm telling you this, don't you? He stepped closer, and she could smell leather and pine on him. You'll be serving me, which means you'll be present for meetings, dinners, private conversations. You'll hear secrets that could get you killed. His gray eyes searched hers. But you can't repeat them, can you? Because you don't speak. Lyra felt her heart racing. He was using her silence as a tool. The nobles will talk freely around you, he continued. They'll forget you're there. And you'll tell me everything. He reached out and gently lifted her chin with one finger, forcing her to meet his gaze. Do we have an understanding, little star? The nickname caught her off guard. Something warm and unfamiliar bloomed in her chest. She managed a small nod. Good. He released her and returned to his desk. You're dismissed for now. Return at sunset. Lady Sarastra dines with us tomorrow, and I want you prepared. Lyra fled the room, her mind spinning. She had 4 weeks until the blood moon. 4 weeks to weave the remaining moon shrouds for her brothers, while serving the most dangerous and perceptive man in the kingdom. And now a threat from Valeries had arrived, a woman with magic and political power who would undoubtedly notice anything unusual. The walls were closing in. That afternoon, she stole an hour to work on the shrouds. In a forgotten storage room in the palace's oldest wing, she'd hidden her materials beneath loose floorboards. The completed shrouds lay folded in careful squares, each one shimmering with captured moonlight. 3 done. 3 remaining. Her fingers worked the moon thread with practiced precision, weaving the intricate patterns the old witch had taught her. Each stitch had to be perfect. Each knot tied with intention. The work demanded absolute focus, and for a little while, Lyra could forget the king's storm-gray eyes and the impossible situation she'd found herself in. A sound in the corridor made her freeze. Footsteps. She quickly hid the shroud beneath her apron and stood just as the door opened. A woman entered, tall and striking, with hair like spun gold and eyes the color of emeralds. She wore traveling clothes of deep purple silk, and power radiated from her like heat from a forge. Lady Sarastra of Valeries. Oh, the woman said, her voice musical and cold. I was told this wing was abandoned. Lyra curtsied, keeping her head bowed. You're a servant? Sarastra stepped closer, her gaze sharp. Strange. You don't carry yourself like one. She circled Lyra slowly, studying her from every angle. What's your name, girl? Lyra pointed to her throat and shook her head. Mute. Sarastra's smile didn't reach her eyes. How unfortunate. She reached out and grabbed Lyra's chin, turning her face toward the window's light. Her fingers were cold as ice. Interesting bone structure. Good skin. Unusual coloring. She released Lyra abruptly. What were you doing in here? Lyra gestured vaguely at the dust, miming cleaning. Sarastra didn't look convinced. Well, run along then. I'm sure there are chamber pots that need emptying somewhere. Make sure you're subscribed and have notifications turned on, because the confrontation between Lyra and Sarastra is only just beginning. Drop a comment and let me know if you think the king suspects Lyra's true identity. Now, back to the story. Chapter 3. The formal dinner was a nightmare dressed in silk and candlelight. Lyra stood behind the king's chair, a silver pitcher of wine in her hands, watching as Lady Sarastra charmed every noble at the table. The woman was magnificent in a gown of midnight blue, sapphires glittering at her throat and wrists. She laughed at Lord Marson's jokes, complimented Lady Ashford's dress, and engaged the military commanders in discussions of border strategy that revealed a sharp tactical mind. And through it all, her green eyes kept drifting to Kaelin with undisguised hunger. "Your Majesty," Sarastra said, raising her wine glass, "my father sends his warmest regards and hopes this visit will strengthen the bonds between our kingdoms." She smiled. In every possible way. The implication hung in the air like perfume. Several nobles exchanged meaningful glances. Kaelin's expression remained neutral. Duke Hadrian is generous with his hopes. "Tell me, Lady Sarastra, what brings you to Nightfall keep a week ahead of schedule?" "Eagerness," she replied smoothly. "When one anticipates something pleasant, why delay?" "And what exactly do you anticipate?" "Partnership. Alliance." Her smile sharpened. "Perhaps more, if the stars align." Lyra refilled the king's wine, her hands steady despite the tension crackling through the room. As she poured, Sarastra's gaze fixed on her. "Your Majesty, forgive my curiosity, but why do you have a mute serving girl attending you at formal dinners? Surely someone more presentable would be appropriate." Several nobles tittered. Lyra felt heat rise to her cheeks. Kaelin's voice cut through the laughter like a blade. "Lyra serves me because she's trustworthy, competent, and doesn't fill my ears with empty flattery. 3 qualities I value more than presentation." The room fell silent. Sarastra's smile never wavered, but something cold flashed in her eyes. "Of course, Your Majesty. I meant no offense." "None taken." Kaelin gestured for more wine, and as Lyra leaned forward to pour, he added quietly, just for her ears, "Well done, little star." The warmth in his voice made her hand tremble, and a single drop of wine fell onto the white tablecloth like blood. After dinner, as the nobles dispersed to the drawing rooms, Kaelin dismissed Lyra with instructions to prepare his study for a late meeting. She was grateful to escape Sarastra's watchful gaze, but as she hurried through the corridors, she heard footsteps behind her. "Wait." Lyra turned. Sarastra approached alone, her silk skirts whispering against the stone floor. "We should talk," the lady said. "Or rather, I'll talk and you'll listen." She stepped close, invading Lyra's space. "I saw how he looks at you. The great Iron Wolf, defender of the realm, and he can't keep his eyes off a servant girl." Her laugh was soft and vicious. "Do you know what happens to distractions in my world, little mute?" Lyra stood her ground, refusing to show fear. "They disappear," Sarastra continued. "Quietly. Cleanly. No mess, no fuss. Just gone." She leaned in, her breath cold against Lyra's ear. "I can smell magic on you, girl. Old magic. Hidden magic. You're not what you pretend to be, are you?" Lyra's pulse hammered, but she kept her expression blank. Sarastra pulled back, studying her. "Interesting. You're braver than you look." She traced one finger down Lyra's cheek, and where her skin touched, frost formed. "I'll find out what you're hiding. And when I do, the king won't be able to protect you. Because he'll be mine, body and throne. Understand?" She swept away, leaving Lyra shaking in the empty corridor, ice melting on her skin. That night, Lyra ran to the Greywood faster than ever before. Her brothers sensed her distress the moment she entered the clearing. They pressed against her, whining, offering what comfort beasts could give. "She knows," Lyra whispered, spending precious words. "Not what, but she knows something." She buried her face in Darian's fur, fighting tears. "I'm running out of time." She worked on the 4th shroud until her fingers bled, weaving by moonlight, racing against a clock only she could hear. The blood moon was 3 weeks away. Sarastra was circling like a shark. And the king. The king was becoming a complication she hadn't anticipated. Over the following days, Kaelin kept her constantly nearby. She attended his meetings with military advisors, stood silent guard while he reviewed intelligence reports, and brought him meals when he worked through the night. And slowly, impossibly, they developed a strange language without words. She learned to read his moods in the set of his shoulders. He learned to interpret the tiny shifts of her expression. When nobles droned on too long, he'd catch her eye, and she'd fight back a smile. When difficult news arrived, she'd pour his wine without being asked, a small gesture of support. "You're good company," he told her one evening as they sat in his study, a fire crackling in the hearth. He was reviewing maps, she was mending a tear in his cloak. "Most people talk at me. You listen. There's a difference." She looked up, meeting his gaze. "I've been thinking about that night in the forest," he continued, setting down his quill. "Those wolves. The way they obeyed you. The way you gathered those strange plants." He leaned back in his chair. "You're working some kind of magic, aren't you?" Lyra's hands stilled on the fabric. "Don't worry. I'm not going to stop you." He stood and crossed to the window, looking out at the darkened kingdom. "I've learned that sometimes the official version of things is a comfortable lie. The banned magics, the forbidden forests, the old laws against the old ways, they were written by fearful men trying to control what they didn't understand." He turned back to her. "But I do understand one thing. Whatever you're doing out there, you're desperate to finish it. And desperate people make mistakes. So I'm offering you a deal." Lyra set aside her sewing and gave him her full attention. "I'll protect you," Kaelin said. "From Sarastra, from the nobles, from anyone who might threaten whatever secret you're keeping. In exchange, when this is over, you'll tell me the truth. All of it." It was a bargain, plain and spoken. Lyra considered it, weighing risks and rewards. Finally, she nodded. "Good." Something that might have been relief crossed his features. He returned to his desk and picked up a small cloth bundle. "I found something today in the old library." The librarian said it was part of a collection about lunar rituals and forgotten kingdoms. He unwrapped the cloth, revealing a silver needle, ancient and delicate, its shaft inscribed with tiny runes. The book said moonweavers used these once, for working with threads that ordinary needles couldn't hold. He held it out to her. "I thought you might have use for it." Lyra stared at the needle, her heart in her throat. It was exactly what she needed for the final, most delicate stages of each shroud. The fact that he'd found it, that he'd given it to her without demanding explanations. She took the needle with shaking hands and looked up at him with eyes full of gratitude and something else. Something warm and terrifying. Kaelin smiled, a real smile that transformed his hard features into something almost gentle. "You're welcome, little star." That was the moment everything changed. That was the moment Lyra realized she wasn't just fighting to save her brothers anymore. She was fighting not to fall in love with a king who could never be hers. Because speaking his name would kill everyone she loved. And loving him in silence would destroy her heart piece by piece. Chapter 4. The blood moon was 2 weeks away when Sarastra made her move. Lyra was crossing the courtyard at dawn, having spent another night finishing the 5th shroud, when guards surrounded her. By order of Lady Sarastra, the captain announced, "You're to be detained for questioning regarding suspicious activities." Lyra's blood ran cold. She looked toward the king's tower, but Kaelin was away, hunting in the eastern forests with several nobles. He wouldn't return until evening. They dragged her to the dungeons beneath the keep, to a cell that stank of mold and fear. Sarastra arrived an hour later, her beautiful face alight with triumph. "Found them," she said, holding up the bundle of moon shrouds. "Hidden in that filthy storage room you kept sneaking off to. Exquisite work, really. The kind of magic that's been outlawed for decades." She leaned against the cell bars. "Who are you weaving these for, little mute? What curse are you trying to break?" Lyra pressed herself against the far wall, her mind racing. Without the shrouds, her brothers were doomed. Without freedom, she couldn't complete the ritual. "I've sent word to the king," Sarastra continued. Told him we discovered evidence of dangerous witchcraft being practiced within his own palace. By the time he returns, the council will have voted to burn you and these pretty tapestries. She smiled. Such a shame. Though I suppose it's for the best. He was getting far too attached to you. She left, taking the shrouds with her, and Lyra sank to the cold stone floor. For the first time in 3 years, she wanted to scream. To rage. To break her silence and let the world hear her fury. But she couldn't. Even now, especially now, she had to protect her brothers. Hours crawled past. The cell grew dark. And then she heard it, a sound like distant thunder, growing closer. Pounding footsteps. Raised voices. The dungeon door slammed open. Kalen strode in, his face terrible with anger, guards scrambling to keep up with him. Where is she? Your Majesty, the dungeon master stammered. Lady Sarastra gave orders. I don't care what order she gave. Open this cell. Now. The door swung open and Kalen stepped inside. He took in Lyra's appearance, dirty, exhausted, afraid, and something murderous flickered in his eyes. Did she hurt you? Lyra shook her head. Did anyone? Another shake. He exhaled slowly, visibly fighting for control. Then he held out his hand. Come with me. She took it, his grip warm and solid, and let him lead her from the dungeon. They climbed stairs, passed through corridors, moved through the palace until they reached his private chambers. Only when the door closed behind them did he release her hand. The council wanted me to approve your execution, he said, his voice deadly quiet. Sarastra presented the shrouds as evidence of dangerous magic. She had half the nobles convinced you were cursing the kingdom. Lyra's eyes widened. I told them if they touched you, I'd consider it an act of treason. He paced like a caged wolf. I don't even know what those tapestries are for. I don't know what secret you're keeping or why. But I know you're not evil. I know you're not a threat. He stopped, facing her. And I know I can't lose you. The last words hung in the air between them, heavy with meaning. Lyra reached for the writing desk, her hands shaking, and scrawled quickly, the shrouds. Where are they? Locked in Sarastra's chambers. She refuses to surrender them. His jaw clenched. She's demanding a formal trial. The council is divided. Lyra wrote again, I need them. Please. I'll get them back, he promised. But Lyra, you have to give me something. Anything. Help me understand what I'm protecting. She stared at the parchment, the quill poised above the page. How could she explain in writing what she barely understood herself? The curse. The blood vow. The impossible choice between saving her family and saving herself. Finally, she wrote, 6 people will die if I fail. Trust me. Kalen read the words, then looked at her for a long moment. 6 people. His expression shifted as understanding dawned. The 6 wolves in the forest. She nodded. They're not just wolves, are they? There, he stopped, piecing it together. The shrouds will transform them back. Break the curse. He sat down heavily. How long do you have? She held up 2 fingers, then pointed at the moon through the window and made a gesture indicating fullness. 2 weeks until the blood moon. He ran a hand through his hair. And Sarastra knows you need those shrouds. Lyra nodded miserably. Then we have a problem, Kalen said. Because she's not going to give them up without a price. His eyes met hers. And I suspect the price she wants is me. The next day, Sarastra made her offer. She would return the shrouds and drop all charges against Lyra if Kalen agreed to a formal betrothal. The wedding would take place within the month. It's a political masterstroke, Lord Marson admitted in the emergency council meeting. We get the alliance with Valeries, she gets the crown, and the magical threat is neutralized. The magical threat, Kalen repeated coldly, is a serving girl trying to save her family. With forbidden magic, Your Majesty. If word spread that we tolerate such practices. Word won't spread, Kalen interrupted, because there's nothing to tolerate. Lyra has broken no laws. The old laws were written by superstitious fools. He stood, silencing the room. I will not bargain my throne for a blackmail scheme disguised as diplomacy. But over the next week, the pressure mounted. Border skirmishes increased. Duke Hadrian sent threatening letters. Sarastra played the nobles like instruments, using charm and veiled threats in equal measure. And through it all, she kept the shrouds locked away, a constant reminder of the leverage she held. Lyra watched it all in helpless silence. She saw Kaelin growing more isolated, more burdened. She wanted to tell him to accept the deal, to save his kingdom even if it meant sacrificing her brothers. But she couldn't speak, and he wouldn't listen anyway. "I won't give you up," he told her one night as they sat in his study. "I know that makes me selfish. A good king would make the political marriage and secure peace. But I can't." He looked at her, and the raw emotion in his eyes made her breath catch. "You're the only real thing in this entire cursed palace, little star. Everything else is lies and games and performances. But you, when you look at me, I know I'm seeing truth." Lyra's heart shattered. She wanted to tell him she wasn't truth. She was the biggest lie of all, a lost princess hiding behind silence, using him to protect secrets that could destroy kingdoms. But the words stayed locked inside her, and all she could do was reach out and take his hand. He pulled her close, and for one brief, perfect moment, she let herself imagine a world where she could speak freely, where she could tell him everything, where his title and her curse didn't stand between them like an unbridgeable chasm. Then reality crashed back. The blood moon was 1 week away. Sarastra held the shrouds, and Lyra had run out of options. That's when her brothers made the choice for her. On the night before the blood moon, the 6 wolves broke their chains. They attacked the palace with coordinated precision, drawing guards away from Sarastra's wing. In the chaos, Lyra ran to the ladies' chambers and found the shrouds exactly where she'd known they'd be, in a locked chest by the window. She grabbed them and ran, but Sarastra was waiting in the corridor. "Clever," the lady said, magic crackling around her fingers. "Using beasts to create a distraction. But did you really think I wouldn't anticipate this?" Lyra clutched the shrouds and tried to dodge past her, but Sarastra was faster. Power slammed into Lyra, throwing her against the wall. The shrouds scattered across the floor. "I've been patient," Sarastra hissed, advancing. "I've played the game. But I'm done waiting." She raised her hand, magic gathering for a killing blow. "When they find your body, I'll comfort the grieving king and—" A sword burst through her chest. Sarastra looked down in shock at the blade protruding from her sternum, then collapsed. Behind her stood Kaelin, his face terrible and calm. "You threatened her," he said quietly. "Big mistake." The palace erupted into chaos. Sarastra's guards clashed with Kaelin's forces. Spells exploded in the corridors. And through it all, Lyra gathered the shrouds and ran for the Greywood. Her brothers met her at the forest edge, human enough now to fight, but not enough to be free. Together, they fought through Valeri's soldiers who'd been waiting in ambush, and reached Moonrest Hollow just as the blood moon began to rise. Lyra's fingers flew, wrapping each wolf in its corresponding shroud. The moonlight intensified, turning silver-white, blazing like captured starfire. Her brothers screamed as bones cracked and reformed. For receded. Humanity returned. When the light faded, 6 men knelt before her in the grass, whole and human and free. Darian, the eldest, looked up at her with tears streaming down his face. "Sister, you did it." And then they froze. Because standing at the clearing's edge, sword still bloody from the battle, was Kaelin. He stared at the scene before him, the transformed men, the magical shrouds, the impossible truth. "Sister," he repeated softly. Then his eyes found Lyra. "You're not just trying to save them. You're one of them." Darian stood, positioning himself protectively in front of Lyra. "She is Lyra Moonborn, last heir of Etherwyn, rightful queen of the Moon Kingdom that your father helped destroy." The words hung in the air like a death sentence. Lyra waited for Kaelin's expression to harden, for betrayal to replace the warmth she'd seen in his eyes. Instead, he started to laugh. Not cruel laughter, but something edged with exhaustion and wonder. "Of course you are. Of course the woman I fell for is secretly royalty and technically my enemy." He sheathed his sword. "Anything else I should know? Any other kingdoms you're heir to? Any other curses I need to worry about?" Lyra stared at him, scarcely daring to breathe. Your Majesty, Darian began, but Kaelin cut him off. She saved you. All of you. With no help, no resources, nothing but determination and moon threat. He walked forward until he stood directly in front of Lyra. You think I care about old wars and dead kingdoms? You think I care about titles and bloodlines? He cupped her face in his hands, and his touch was impossibly gentle. I care about you, little star. Just you. Lyra's eyes filled with tears, and for the first time in 3 years, she opened her mouth to speak. The blood vow waited, ready to kill everyone she loved if she said more than 3 sentences. But she'd planned for this. 3 sentences. Carefully chosen. Absolutely worth it. Kaelin, she breathed, and the bond between them ignited like wildfire, ancient magic recognizing its match. I love you. I always have. The curse shattered. The blood vow dissolved. And Lyra Moonborn, last Queen of Etherwyn, kissed the Iron Wolf of Nightfall Keep while her brothers cheered and the Blood Moon witnessed their truth. Later, when kingdoms had been negotiated and alliances reforged, when Etherwyn rose from its ashes and Nightfall Keep opened its gates to old magic, Kaelin asked her, "Was my name worth breaking your silence?" Lyra smiled, finally free to speak, finally free to love. It was the only word I ever wanted to say. If you made it to the end, you're part of something special. Hit that like button. Drop a comment telling me what you thought of Lyra and Kaelin's story. And don't forget to subscribe for more tales of magic, love, and impossible choices. Because this is just the beginning.